Welcome back to another video on Gearsaw Studios, and today I'm going to be showing you how to build yourself a giant sword nether portal, utilizing some of those new shelf blocks. It's going to fit into your world quite nicely if you have some other dark fantasy stuff going on, and it's quite practical, pretty easy to do. So we can always add this to any unique areas of your world, and it just makes going to the nether much more stylish. To begin, we just have to get ourselves a nice area. I decided to go with this hill here, mainly because usually it's kind of hard to put things on hills. This does come back to bite me a little later, however, it's completely fine to do. I strongly recommend using those less conventional pieces of terrain in your worlds, so that way it's more filled out. There's nothing that hurts motivation more than a completely empty world. So let's begin. We need to have a nether portal, and they can be about 23 blocks tall. So I'm going to use that limit. Make sure it's embedded into the ground and just go all the way up. And you can see here, 23 blocks. And you can go a little bit higher or lower, it doesn't really affect the build terribly much. As long as you're within the ballpark of 18 to 23, you should be fine. I'm pretty sure I go with 22 here. And then, what we want to do is, we want to decorate the sides of the build. Initially, I use quartz for this, so I'm going to be using this actually as a bad example of what to do. The problem with using all this quartz along the outside is actually because it makes the sword a bit too thick. Remember, your nether portal can only be so large, or really so small in this case, so when we add too much quartz to it, it can create a problem. But anyways, let's go on with the middle part. We want to make a little bit of a swirling design, almost like a snake. Snakes aren't swirling, but oh well. We want to add a design, because the purple of the sword, the portal itself, is actually going to be part of the build. A lot of swords kind of ignore that, but instead, let's make it into a proper part of the build. So you can see here, some stairs to make that snake pattern. Pause if you need to take a look. And here, I'm going to replace the sides with a much better block to make sure it's thinner. So we see how we have that black edge there. That's completely fine. In fact, we want to be utilizing the nether portal a bit more. And to do this, we'll be using some shelves. This part is pretty easy. All you do is go up and down with all your pale shelves. Make sure to do both sides. You might have to put a little bit of a staircase or crouch to use your portal properly, and you can make adjustments if that's a problem. But anyways, right here, bunch of pale shelves, and we get to use the black outline of the portal as part of the build, making your blade a little bit sharper and thus more professional. Because, the worst thing that you can do is making your sword look less like an actual sword, more like a hunk of blocks. Right here, I also mirrored the snake design onto the back, making little holes across it. That's a stylistic decision. You can always change it if you want. So now we have all this going on, and what we want to do is light the portal, and you can see how the pattern works out. So hooray on that. With the blade itself done, now we can really get onto the part of the build we can customize a bit more. While I could really only change the color of the blade, and honestly white is just the best color for it, the hilt itself can be a lot more interesting. I'm going to be using a lot more dark fantasy style stuff because of course it's dark fantasy month on my channel. So more deep slate, more blackstone like the stuff on the right. So now what we want to do is go to the middle of it and add an accent. Something like this. Nether wart is a good one, although you can use whatever colorful block. I recommend not using concrete though and finding another bright block though, because instead of red, nether wart, and you get a much deeper shade of red. And of course, that's the best part of using it. So now we have this in the middle, and now we need to make it go off to both sides. So right here, I add a little bit of a bird formation, you could say. I add some prongs like it's a sword. Make sure to flip your head upside down in real life in order to see how this all works. Just make sure that your sword is looking sufficiently sword-like. I'll be showing mine at the end. But now, what we want to do is make sure that the guard is sharp. Using some stairs, upside down stairs versus normal stairs is a good way to add that. So experiment a bit with it, because each sword needs a little bit of variation on it, or else it might get boring. Now that we have this, let's just continue modifying it with a few stairs. Now that we have that, we have to go to an interesting part of the build. The fact that we did a 2 wide nether portal means that the middle of the build, the accent looks fine, but the part you actually hold, the grip, that can be a little bit more awkward to do. However, we have a very helpful block to handle this: walls. While you might want to do something more wooden for this, you can use walls to really just make this so much easier on you. If you're building in an old version like before 1.16, you might have to do something like logs, but fortunately, these things connect very well. And hooray, we have a part we can hold the sword by, but it's missing something. We need something called a pommel at the end, the little diamond shape you see, so something like this. Of course, this is not my final design. I went for something a bit spikier with some stairs, but still, it gets the idea across. Now, our next order of business is to tidy up this thing. While it looks mostly complete by here, we need to introduce a new block to this. For the front part of your build, let's add one shade lighter, such as deep slate. So if you made yours completely out of deep slate, the front should be tough, and stuff like that. Alternatively, you can introduce a new color, like if you did blackstone for the whole thing, maybe this part could be nether brick. When you make your sword two-tone, it of course looks a lot more awesome. So let's do that. And you can see here the contrast works much better. By adding the black parts to the edges and making the center deep slate, it's just more visually interesting than if it was just completely blackstone. Now the sword itself is nearly done. While it looks identical to the thumbnail iteration minus the terrain around it, we're missing something. Let's switch to nighttime. Of course, my videos are lightly brightened at night, but we have an issue. The top of the build is just dark. That's not something we want. Instead, let's add a bit of glowstone to this part. You can hide it with slabs or under the walls. And now our thing is nicely lit up, so we don't have to worry about that. Now, here's where your build gets interesting. Replace the immediate area around it with an unconventional block you don't see in the environment, like gray concrete powder. And then, if you're not on a hilly area, make your elevation changes made of mud, like this. Of course, I'm in a hilly area, so it doesn't work, and I have to replace it with more gray concrete powder. But still, change the biome around it. Maybe some crimson nylium, maybe something else that I'm not thinking of. Simply change the biome around it, and it doesn't have to be a real biome. The wasteland is not actually a thing in Minecraft, so get creative. You like a certain part of a movie? Try building that around the sword. Let's make sure that this is more than just generic nether. So now we have all this with the gray concrete powder or your block of choice, and now we have to decorate it. Starting from the sword itself, build a haphazard staircase out of a matching block. Blackstone was good for this palette, but of course you'll have to make your own executive decisions on what you think works best. If you need a second person to help you with that, you can always comment what your sword's area you want to look like, and I can help with your palette decisions. But anyways, we have this rugged staircase, and we're going to have some more blackstone and arcs around this. Take a nice vertical view of your build if you can. If you're in survival mode pre-elytra, then maybe not, but still. Let's have these streaks to make it look like it wasn't just built into the ground, but rather plunged into the ground. Those fractures over there with the lava and such, let's make sure we decorate this area similarly. Of course, make sure that it's detailed and such. And I made sure to do that. And there's a whole bunch of tiny little things to unpack here, and I strongly recommend that you design some of your own. So first, the rugged staircase, I have some magma around it. And then, I also have some glass, magenta, then purple panes. It matches the nether portal. And of course, that's very important, makes the sword look nice and magical. Then, at the top, added a little bit of nether brick at the very base of the blade, just to make sure it looked cool. Then, using that same nether brick, we can add some ruins around here. And you can see there are pillars of nether brick with their wall and fence variations. You can make a whole structure, ruined structure around this one, maybe like bits and pieces of a castle or a tower, to really add that lore to it. Of course, that's a little bit beyond the scope of just an example version, but still, you can go completely wild with this. Maybe make some custom trees. They're using some pale with some stairs and slabs, and then some nether wart above that acts as the leaves. And then I have some weeping vines with the tips sheared right off them to make sure they don't grow anymore. Right here, we also have some bones, and I actually recommend using quartz instead of bone blocks, so that way you can make more detailed things. Rather than just some ribs, you could even make a hand coming out of the ground. And then, we can also add some volcanic activity here. Black concrete powder, making sure no dirt is exposed, and then put some lava in a hole, and put campfires under it. Be very careful about exposing any dirt and such. So now, with all those little details surrounding the sword, congratulations, you have the overworld side complete. However, we're still missing something. Right here, we actually have to go to the nether to finish this up. Because of course, it's a sword going into the ground. Having a generic portal on the other side could cause issues. So going into the nether for the first time, you could see from the lag, we have a ruined portal, and we even have a bastion off to the right. So you have two choices here. You can either move your portal up to the nether ceiling, so that way it looks normal, or you could build this tip of the sword coming out of the ground, which raises more questions. Is this upside down? Who knows? But anyways, start by placing a few blocks above your portal. You can adjust its height to make it look like more of the sword ended up in the nether. Then, what you want to do is also add the pale shelves back. Pretty simple process. And then, once you have those pale shelves, we add some stairs and such, and we want to end it all off with a point. Because of course swords are meant to be pointy because that's kind of their job. So add some stairs, add some shelves, and we can experiment with some trapdoors as well. Now with that done, we have the tip of the sword. Notice some stacked stairs, some trapdoors, some shelves. Pause if you want to copy it. But you can see right here, as long as it embeds itself within any cliff sides, this is a very bad position to actually build the portal, but oh well. We now have this whole thing complete, which is really good. We can go to the other side, and we can take a nice long look at it, and hooray, you have your sword. So now, let's take a quick look in Vibrant Visuals. This is currently being recorded in 50% gamma, and you can see how this all works. The colors pop. If you have any snow on your build, make sure to add string to make sure it doesn't come back. And all the lights work much better with that added bloom. So hooray, it looks good in both Vibrant Visuals and normal Minecraft. And I assume it will also look really good with whatever shaders you like installing. We can also go on to the nether side. This is actually one of my first times seeing Vibrant Visuals in the nether, but still, we can see right here, it's nice and pointy, looks like the other edge of the sword. We might want to modify a few blocks here and there, just to make sure it actually looks pointy. So now we have that end of the sword, and thus we have a completed video here. The sword is done, and it looks really nice. You can add it to any areas of your world that need that extra pizzazz. And if you like this style of build, well, I have some very good news for you. This is Dark Fantasy Month because my viewers voted on it, and off to the right, we actually have ourselves the Dark Tower just to match with it. I'll be building 2 more of these style of builds this month. By the way, this is the end of today's video. Please like and subscribe, and enjoy the rest of your day. Gearsaw out.